Take control. Take control of your camera.
Okay, first things first. I kind of got too excited. I owe people an apology because I did a rave review of something that later turned out to be maybe not so great. And this is why one of the things that made me realize that I'm not going to be a gear review guy, because first of all, I don't know what I'm talking about. And second of all, I'm not that interested. And combine those two elements and maybe you get a less than competent review channel. I was raving about the Fujifilm camera remote app, which I was excited about because I thought it would allow me to get monitoring going while recording video, and it does, but its limits became more and more apparent to me after using it for a while, and it's really kind of disappointing because first of all, there seems to be something with the file handling. Even if you have your camera set to 4K, this app just has a mind of its own, and it basically shoots 720 and that's it. So it lies to you, which I don't appreciate. And the other thing is the control on the app really isn't that great. I mean, you can set your camera to manual, but then when you turn on the app, it's like, oh, he probably meant continuous. So that's not fantastic. So I'm going to look for a different solution. I'm probably going to spring for, now I'm contradicting another video of mine in which I talked about not buying new stuff all the time. But I'm going to get a Blackmagic monitor, or maybe, what are they called? Ninja? I don't know. It's between those two. And then I hear that external recorders yield better results, or more reliable results maybe. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here today to tell you that the red light on my audio amp is lighting, and that means that I have to switch off the camera and check the audio. And then I'll talk about something else. So, that was an interesting pan, right? I'm going to explain real quickly why I did that. I got frustrated with that monitoring solution, as I just told you. And I figured, okay, since the X-T2 doesn't give me a flip out screen, I'm going to flip the camera itself. Because the most important thing I need to know is it rolling? And I can only see that on the monitor. So I rigged it up on this little microphone stand, and I put the microphone stand on top of a Lazy Susan. So I can flip it around, check that everything's looking okay, and then I just start blabbering. So that's my little compromise rig for now until I get a monitor, probably in combination with an external recorder. What I really wanted to talk about today, though, is that I had a little breakthrough with my attempts at becoming a more interesting photographer. And I don't want to oversell this, but I think there are some interesting thoughts here, maybe for people who are at the same state where I am. I think when you start out with photography, it is normal that you trust your camera more than yourself. And your modern camera is probably designed in such a way that it can really give you great results, even if you're not that familiar with all the exposure secrets. Then later on in the development of a typical photographer, I think you start experimenting with getting more and more elements away from the camera and taking control over them yourself. Obviously, ISO is the most boring one because the payoff you get from pushing your ISO is simply that the camera becomes more sensitive in low light, and the sort of compromise you make is that you introduce more noise. So none of those things, while important, are as fascinating as the stuff that you can do with aperture and shutter speed. However, I think most people then start thinking a lot about focus. They focus on focus because it has become probably the main criterion by which people judge a good photo versus one they wouldn't even consider. I think we're a little obsessed with sharpness and focus nowadays because it's become so much easier with modern lenses to nail focus. Autofocus keeps getting better, but also the sharpness of the lenses themselves versus so-called vintage lenses is becoming more and more precise. And we're just used to tack sharp photos in wherever we look. And if you think about some classic photos that are world famous, they may not live up to those standards in terms of focus. So there used to be a weight on other elements, composition. It seems to me, and what the photo had to say, maybe used to be a little more important. So we think about focus all the time, and we think about metering as a secondary thing. Like we want a well-exposed photo, but that's pretty easy to get, and we are kind of a little too happy to let the camera take care of that, I feel. And I think the next step after you've thought a lot about focus is you think more about metering, and you think more about light and dark, because the translation of the word photography is painting with light or drawing with light. So that is where, to me, it becomes interesting. And I've noticed that photos that fascinate me, the pictures of my great heroes, beyond composition and subject matter and maybe what the photo tells you on an emotional level, is about how they work with light. So I took this photo yesterday of my daughter, where I decided to not get an evenly lit picture, not get what the camera would give you. The camera in the same situation, if I set everything on auto, would have given me a totally different photo. It would have exposed to make her face brighter. It would have exposed to make her hair more detailed. There would be more information visible in the shadows of her hair and her shirt. And I instead decided to take the camera completely manual, go as low as possible with the ISO because I don't like grain, go as fast as possible with the shutter speed. So I put a short shutter speed of, I think, 180. And then instead of focusing the focus, I let the camera take care of that with autofocus, and I started playing with the aperture as if I was kind of focusing the aperture. And then I decided that I wanted to, more than anything, I wanted the highlights to be protected, not to be blown out. And I was willing to let everything else fall wherever it fell, which meant that the shadows and the blacks fell way down into darkness. And I love the result. Now, this is still, I still have to learn more about this, and I have to apply this technique to more pictures, but I think that's what I'm going to do next, and especially in very contrasty light outside, when I have, bright daylight and there are strong shadows. That's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go for the bright parts, expose that those are absolutely there, that I don't risk blowing those out, and then kind of not care as much about all the information in the shadows, because what we do in the shadows, to quote one of my favorite movies, is not as important to me. Actually, I love the contrasty look, and I used to try to get it by pushing contrast in post and pulling down the shadows and the blacks in post. But I think it's much more interesting to sort of sacrifice part of that stuff while you're shooting, and then see if the picture is not much more much closer to what you imagined already when it comes in, and then your adjustments. I mean, it's in music, it's the same thing. You want, if you record an instrument, for instance, you want there to be a great sound on your tape or on your digital recorder, and then later you put in equalization and compression and reverb and all kinds of things. But if the sound is not great at the source, you can spend hours and hours and hours trying to tweak it, and it'll never sound great. So I think it's important to get the information that you're really interested in right away, and I'm hoping that way you'll end up with results where you spend less time tweaking and more time perfecting something that already has your fingerprints on it. I mean, in the case of this photo, I hope it doesn't have my fingerprints on it. But what I'm saying is that that is already designed and shaped by decisions that you made. I think that's the future for me. That's the next step to look into that field. I'm very excited by that because in many ways it's a step back. It's a simplification process, which is always good. It's a purification. It takes control away from the technology and makes the technology work for you, which I think is ultimately what I'm aiming at. So wish me luck with that, and I'll keep you posted.